Drew Lock is about to make his second straight start for the New York Giants coming up on Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. What did you think about what he did in Dallas, and how much upside might he have? Let's talk about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown live. Hi again, everybody, and welcome to the Big Blue Breakdown Live. I'm Paul Dottino. We are part of the New York Giants on SI Media Network, streaming through their YouTube page. So glad you could join us tonight. We're back to our regularly scheduled program on Wednesday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The goal is to do at least an hour, hopefully an hour and a half. And if you guys want to keep chatting, well, maybe we'll go a little bit longer as well. Already, Christine chimes in and says, good evening, and a good evening back to you. She's one of our loyal viewers, in case you folks have not tuned into this program before. Just to let you know, we're going to take video calls, so you can actually get on video and chat with me. You see the address at the bottom of the screen. If you prefer, keep your camera off, go to that address. We can do an audio phone call like we do on Big Blue Kickoff Live on the Giants site during the day, or we can always go to the chats. And that's what is over on the right-hand side of the screen, and we can just type up chats, and I will try to answer every comment and question that you guys fire at me during the course of the program. All right, so where do we begin? It's been a while since we've had a program, right? Remember now, we went on, I believe it was last Tuesday. We had to change things up because the Giants had a Thanksgiving game in Dallas. We all know that they lost that one 27-20 because of travel and so forth and so on. Obviously, I'm part of the broadcast team. Could not do the show on Wednesday night, so we did it last Tuesday night. And so, folks, I apologize if you were looking for us last Wednesday. We tried to give you enough notice on Twitter. If you didn't get it, again, I'm sorry, but we are going to be back here now. As far as I can tell, we'll be back here every Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the rest of the season. All right, so what happened today at Giants camp, and where do the Giants stand as they go into their final 5 games of the season? Big Blue says, good evening, and I say right back at you, Big Blue, another one of our loyal folks who's been sticking with this program since the beginning. The Giants are 2-10, okay? They've lost 7 in a row for the first time since 2019. They are no better than 2-10 for the third time since 2019. It's been tough. It's been real tough. The Giants, let me just check something here. I'm sorry. 2-10 for the third time since 2019. No better than 2-10. They've lost 7 in a row, first time since 2019. And this is the third time since 2017 that they've been no better than 2-10 after 12 games. Okay, now that I have successfully depressed you, and I didn't mean to do that, folks, but, you know, one of the things that you have to do, unfortunately, is to deal with reality. And this just has been one of those seasons. Let's go through today's injury report, because Brian Daboll was not very optimistic about a handful of these guys being able to play on Sunday. Would not rule them out yet, but he did tell us they're probably going to be week to week. I want to get a big hello out to John Morano. Also, a big hello out to Connor Welp. Hello, great to see you as well. Hey, there's Tim, another one of our loyal people. Tim Frith 24 says, how's it going? Tim, I just keep the wheel turning, my friend. You know, we don't have any fireworks here. You know, we don't have any parades. We don't have any pizza parties going right now. We're just keeping the wheel turning. That's about all we can do. Salutations to Queensboro, brother. Hey, there's Timothy Menace comes back with a good evening, and a good evening to you. Tim, I see you got a question here about Shane and for Daboll. Give me a minute. let me update you folks as to what happened today at practice, and then I'm going to get to you, Tim. So we're going to say goodbye to the comment for a minute. Stick with me. I don't know if you got something on the stove or you got something in the oven. If you can just keep that warm for a couple of minutes here, I do want to update everybody on what happened today. So here's what we were told today. Tommy DeVito's arm is coming along. Remember, last week he didn't play against Dallas because he had a swollen right forearm. It is coming along, but to the point where today he was only limited at practice. Brian Daboll said in all likelihood he will not be playing against the Saints. There is a chance, okay? There is a chance he could be the number 2 quarterback ahead of Tim Boyle, but that's not even certain, depending upon how Tommy's arm feels over the next several days. Okay, so this is Drew Lock's game. That's it. This is Drew Lock's game. All right. In addition to the injury with DeVito, Brian Daboll said he thought that Drew Lock did some good things against the Cowboys. And there's no question about that, because the Giants, you guys know about how I feel about the scoring zone. They say the red zone is the 20-yard line of the opponent. I say the scoring zone is the 30-yard line of the opponent. Because if you get to the opponent's 30, that's a 47, 48-yard field goal. Which in today's game, come on, 85, 90%. So you have to get points anytime you get to the opponent's 30. That's what I unofficially call the scoring zone. Well, for the season, the Giants are only getting points when reaching the scoring zone 2/3 of the time. That is the biggest reason why the Giants don't have a better record. Think about that. You're getting to the other team's 30-yard line, and you're coming up empty with 0 points. Not even a field goal. This isn't even about touchdowns, people. This is about points. And that, to me, that's why I created this stat. Because the scoring zone, that's a mandatory. You get to the other team's 30, you better not come away with anything less than a field goal. So what's the situation for the Giants? All right, here we go. As of now, the Giants have scored on 65% of their trips into the scoring zone. They are 32 scoring plays on 49 trips. That's 65%. That, to me, is the biggest stat that I can give you as to why the Giants have the poor record they have. Now, what did Drew Lock do besides lead the Giants to 2 fourth-quarter scores as they got it to a 7-point deficit against Dallas with about a minute and a half to go? And then the defense could not prevent Dallas from getting a first down to run out the clock. Well, Drew Lock, on 4 trips inside the scoring zone, drove the Giants to 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals. So he was 4 for 4 in scoring zone opportunities with him directing the offense. That is certainly a very big positive. Not to mention the fact that he showed a lot of mobility. We talked about that during training camp, how Lock was much more mobile than people had given him credit for, and he showed it in Dallas by virtue of not only the touchdown run, which was obviously short, but he had a 28-yarder where it looked to me like he kicked the pylon down, but they marked him at the 1, and then Singletary, I believe it was Singletary or Tracy, wound up plunging in for the touchdown anyway. So, they got the score. But Lock showed me something the other day. I believe that both Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock over the last 2 weeks have both taken a small step forward in terms of enhancing their on-the-field value. Now, there are still 5 games to go, starting with the Saints game on Sunday. I'm going to say the same thing now about Drew Lock that I said about Tommy DeVito. Okay? DeVito got hurt. Lock had an opportunity, and he did something with it. It wasn't spectacular. They did not win the game. He didn't put up 300 yards. He didn't throw for 4 touchdowns. Yes, he got burned on a screen pass that was deflected and went for a pick 6. That could happen to anybody. Yes, he did get hammered trying to get out of the pocket and did give up a fumble. 2 turnovers. Dallas converted 2 touchdowns on the 2 turnovers. There's no question that those 2 blemishes ruined his day. Absolutely. Helped ruin the Giants' day. But there's also no question that he did a number of things really well. And on Wednesday morning, he was given pretty much the idea that he was probably going to be the quarterback on Thursday. Well, you know what? He didn't get a chance to practice with the first team. All he got was 1 walkthrough session. A walkthrough, which means they're not going full speed. And that's the only practice he had with the Giants' first-string skill position players. So I think it's fair to say that he didn't have much of an opportunity. He was kind of going in raw when he faced the Cowboys last week. And as we know, they were down 13-10 at halftime. Didn't do enough offensively, especially in the second half, on 3 possessions in the final 6 minutes of that quarter, the second quarter, when they only had to settle for 1 field goal. It was a bit of a struggle. But I think reasonably that's to be expected when he was thrown into such a difficult situation. Remember, he didn't even have many preseason snaps with this team. He appeared in a preseason game, immediately got hurt, was knocked out of the lineup, and it was up to Tommy DeVito basically to play the bulk of the preseason. So what I'm saying to you is this. The Giants finally got a chance to see Drew Lock in a game with a bunch of their regulars. And you know what? It was okay. And there were some flashes of good things. So I'm going to tell you what I said about Tommy DeVito. Okay? And that is this. Tommy DeVito had an opportunity, took a small step forward 2 weeks ago. Drew Lock had an opportunity, took a small step forward last week. Drew Lock is now getting a second opportunity against the Saints. Let's see if he takes an even bigger step forward this week. Because in addition to DeVito's injury, Brian Daboll said he thought that he wanted to get a look at Drew Lock in a game, given that he would have a full week to prepare. Well, that's one less factor that could inhibit his performance taken off the board. He's not being thrown in on 24 hours notice. He's had a full week going into this game to get his mind right, to get his confidence right, to get his emotions right, and most of all, to work with the guys he's going to be throwing to. So let's see what Drew Lock does. If Drew Lock shows us that there's a lot of upside coming up on Sunday against the Saints, if he shows us, if he throws for 300 yards, if he throws for 3 touchdowns, well, now all of a sudden, he injects himself into the conversation of, well, there's only 4 more games to go. Let's see if he can do it again. He will have earned another opportunity. And if he produces with those opportunities, maybe he puts himself into the conversation to be back in 2025. That's what this is all about. As I look at the final 5 games of this season, and really the final 7 when you consider DeVito a week and a half ago and then Lock last week, one of the biggest things that the Giants have to answer is, will any of the 3 quarterbacks that they had to open the 2024 season be on the roster in 2025? Well, we know Jones is not going to be. Lock is a free agent at the end of the season, so it's going to take some doing to re-sign him. Does he deserve that? I think we are now going to get an opportunity to find out if he deserves that conversation. Tommy DeVito, ditto for him. The unfortunate part for Tommy is that if Drew Lock seizes this opportunity and runs with it and shows that his arrow is really pointing up, well, then he becomes more of a priority to talk to about 2025, be it as a backup or as a maybe even a bridge. There's enough time here with a month left in the season for a quarterback to get hot and put up a handful of really good games that could change the perception of where he stands going into the offseason. And that, to me, is the biggest thing that the Giants can try to figure out over the course of the next 5 weeks. All right, so that's the Drew Lock scenario. And I'm going to get to your chats in just a second. Let's finish off the injury problem. Deonte Banks did not practice, sore ribs. Jermaine Illuminor, sore quad, did not practice. Evan Neal, sore hip, did not practice. Nacho Nunez Roches, sore neck, sore shoulder, did not practice. Bobby Okereke, sore back, did not practice. How does this involve other players? Well, according to Brian Daboll, he'll go with Azudu and Hubbard as the two starting tackles if he has to. He's looking at either McFadden or Murasau at linebacker to become the signal callers with the green dot and the speaker in the helmet to run the defense. Brian Daboll also mentioned that we knew tight end Theo Johnson, the rookie from Penn State, had suffered a foot injury late in the Dallas game and that he'd be lost for the season. Well, Brian Daboll said today that he had foot surgery yesterday. And so they've already started that clock for Theo Johnson. Also mentioning that because we know Dexter Lawrence is already out, remember his elbow popped out, so he's done for the season. That injury happened in the Dallas game. Coach Daboll saying that Elijah Chapman, who has shown a lot of strength and power and quickness, they like to use him more in passing downs. Well, he's got basically no choice. He is going to have to play a lot more snaps than he's used to, and it will also be on running plays. The Giants are really thin right now at the defensive tackle spot. Rather than even talk about some of the other folks, who, whether it's Casey Rogers and Jordan Riley and DJ Davidson is nicked up. He was limited today because of a sore shoulder. Rather than get into that, because that's just, it is what it is. You're just asking guys, give us some snaps and see what you can do. I thought it was more important to talk about the quarterback scenario and the other big name players that are not going to be, in all likelihood, available for the Saints game. Davidson was limited today. DeVito was limited today. Bryce Ford Wheaton, sore Achilles, limited today. Of course, he's important on special teams, coverage units. Jordan Riley, sore knee, limited today. Again, you can understand the defensive tackle spot, right? You don't have Nacho. You don't have Dexter Lawrence. And you've got Riley and Davidson both being limited. What do you think Alvin Kamara is thinking tonight? Oh, boy. Inside linebacker Deontay Johnson, injured ankle. He had his practice window activated today, so he was at practice. I would anticipate, as long as he gets through the next several days, I would anticipate that he comes up to the off the injured list and comes up to the active 53. I would anticipate that by the end of the week. The Giants were very pleased with what he showed before he had gotten injured. All right, so that's the situation as far as the injuries are concerned with the Giants and the status report coming into tonight's program. Now let's see if we can go back now and go through some of your chats. Remember, folks, at the bottom of the screen here, you see right underneath me, there's a scroll. You can go there for a video phone call with me if you like. We'll get you right up and get your face on the program. And, you can show all your relatives how you got to participate in the program, or you could just do an audio call, black out your camera. You can do that. I love taking calls because I'm a people person. I love to talk to people. So, but we'll deal with the chat as best as we can. Excuse me. All right, what do we have here? Tim Frith, 24. Will the Giants retain Joe Schoen for next season and fire Brian Daboll? Well, Tim, I'm going to go back to what John Mara said during the press conference following the Wellington Mara documentary a month ago. He had no intentions of making a change with either guy for the rest of the season and did not anticipate making any change, either one of them, during the offseason. Now, I will put an asterisk on that. I believe he was being truthful, honest, and totally forthright. I don't think he wants to make a change with either of them. However, circumstances can change over time. Now, the Giants have lost 7 in a row. They've got 5 more games to go. If they wind up finishing the season on a 12-game losing streak, certainly John Mara has the right to change his mind, as does Steve Tisch, the other co-owner of the franchise. And if the team did go into the offseason losing 12 in a row, would anybody be surprised at anything that they did? Probably not. Now, I do believe, and it's my opinion, that what Joe Schoen told everybody during his bye-week press conference a few weeks ago is that overall, this is a younger roster than it was in 2022. And from top to bottom, there is, if not more raw talent, certainly more potential and certainly much more upside than the 2022 Giants had. And that team won 9 games and went to the playoffs. If you are to believe that and agree with him, I happen to be on that page. One would think that as this team is sliding, even with the potential of a losing streak down the stretch, we've already gone through the injury list, and it's not pretty. You're losing so many of your frontline players. I would think that if you buy into the roster, that Joe Schoen certainly has some feet to stand on. And I believe Carl Banks said this week on one of the pods that he was a guest on, you would think that both of them, have done enough and warranted enough. Now, there'll have to be some changes. You can't just run it back if you finish the season on a 12-game losing streak. Obviously, you cannot. You will have to make some type of changes. That's just natural. But I do think that Giants ownership will try to resist making changes. It doesn't mean they won't, but I do think they will try to resist. See, there's a question that every single franchise must ask when they have a disappointing year. And the question can be phrased in 2 ways, and it has to do with the status of your GM and your coaching staff. You sit back at the end of the season, and this is what the Giants have always done, outside of 2 exceptions, and we know what they are, the Miracle of the Meadowlands fumble, and obviously Ben McAdoo some years ago. It comes down to this. Wellington Mara always told his son, John, take emotions out of the decision. It's a big decision. It's an important decision. Don't let emotions sway you. The only way to do that is to take a deep breath and get a couple of days into the off season after the stew has stopped cooking on the stove. That's the only way to make this decision rationally and logically without allowing emotions to infect it. I do believe in that process. I agree. That's a sound, logical process. that the late Wellington Mara passed along to his son John. And so I believe that's what the Giants will do. That's the way they want to go about it. That's the way I believe they will go about it. And then you ask yourself, once you get to that point, you ask yourself the following question. What reasons are there to keep? And you look for reasons to keep. Or you ask yourself, what are the reasons to make a move? And then you start listing the reasons to make a move. The tenor of the question slants the answers. Are you looking for reasons to keep, or are you looking for reasons to get rid of? You have to figure out which question you're going to ask. The Giants usually ask the question of, what are the reasons to keep? And if they find enough reasons, then no change is made. If they don't find enough reasons, a change is made. So you see, you don't predetermine the outcome by selecting question A or question B. It just creates a different burden of proof. And I don't know if I've explained that clearly. I hope I have. If somebody doesn't understand, again, please give me a call on this program. But it's a different measure or a different burden of proof. Show me reasons why they should stay, or show me reasons why they should go. And that it's a different burden of proof. That's the best way I can say it. And when you are an organization that does believe in continuity, that does believe, for the most part, in the people that you have, you usually will ask, let me see how many reasons are there to stay the course. And that's the list that you're going to look at. And if that list stacks up to enough, then you've got your answer. So that Tim Frith 24, that is the most complete and honest answer that I can give you, because I absolutely believe that that's the truth. Big Blue says, what makes the season more depressing is that Coach Coughlin got snubbed for the Hall of Fame. Oh boy. All right. Big Blue, here's what I have heard. People around the league, and yes, Tom Coughlin to me is an absolute automatic for the Hall of Fame, and I do think that it really stinks that he is being asked to wait. But now that they've changed the voting categories and the sections to be a little bit more specific, and he is in the coaches category, I think what's going to happen is Mike Holmgren, Mike Shanahan, Tom Coughlin are all very much on the same plateau in terms of their overall body of work. I think all three of them should be Hall of Famers. Now, what I have heard from people who know folks on the committee is that because I believe they're only allowed to pick one coach every year, it may be another year or so, or two even, that Tom Coughlin has to wait. And I hope not. I don't want him to wait. But I do believe that Coughlin, Shanahan, and Holmgren will all be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at some point. However they decide to vote them in, based on what I have heard from people who know folks on the committee, all three of those guys are going to get in at one time or another. It's just a matter of what the order is. Big Blue, I hope that somewhat explains my position. Let's see. Yeah, Christine says Coach Coughlin 100% deserves the Hall of Fame. Sure he does. Christine also loves the scoring zone. Well, it's one of the things that over the years I have just decided that it's important enough that I keep a chart on the scoring zone. Everybody has the red zone, and you can look up red zone stats anywhere on the internet. They're always available. They're always there. But I think, in all honesty, the scoring zone, the 30-yard line, I think that's a much more important, in my opinion, based on the fact that the game has changed and these robo-kickers can make field goals from virtually anywhere. I think the scoring zone is a very, very important, very, very important number. I think the red zone is just, I almost think it's archaic. Now, let me see here. What can I give you? Remember I told you that there are, hold on a second here. Let me take a look at my trusty laptop, which has all of my data in it that I keep, my charts. Okay, here's what I got. I got the Giants on 49 trips inside the scoring zone with 17 touchdowns and 15 field goals. Those are your 32 scoring plays inside the other team's 30. That's what you got. 17 touchdowns and, 17 field goals and 15 touchdowns. So it is 32 scoring plays on 49 trips inside the 30-yard line or the scoring zone. Just for what it's worth, okay, I'm gonna give you this because it is certainly relevant. I want to see if I have my complete game-by-game breakdown, just so you understand how significant it was that Drew Lock got the Giants 4 for 4 in the scoring zone. The Giants were 3 for 4 in the scoring zone against Washington in week 2. That was a really good week for them. They were 3 for 5 in the scoring zone against Cleveland. That wasn't a terrible, but I mean, come on. You want to do better than that. 5 for 7 in the scoring zone against Seattle. 3 for 4 in the scoring zone against Washington the second time around. So, wow. You know what? So I build my spreadsheet every week, and I just keep adding to it. You know what I just saw? Giants were 4 for 4 in the scoring zone against Dallas both times this year. In fact, wow, those are their season highs. Talking about maximum efficiency, they had 4 field goals on 4 scoring zone trips in the first game against Dallas at home, and now had 2 field goals and 2 touchdowns on 4 trips against Dallas on the road. Now, again, touchdowns matter compared to field goals, but the fact that you came away with points, see, that's the killer, folks. The real gut punch is when you get inside the other team's scoring zone and come up with 0. That can't happen. So that's why it's important that the Giants were able to go 4 for 4 in the scoring zone with Drew Lock last week. All right. Christine says, turnovers are horrible. They sure are. They'll kill you every time. Jeffrey Pettiford says, John Mara, please call Belichick. End of the season for GM. Oh, call Belichick at the end of the season for GM. Let him build this team back up. Well, Jeffrey, a couple of things. I think it's been reported out there by several people who know Bill Belichick that he does not wish to be a general manager. That if he does come back into the league in 2025, and I don't know for sure if he does, he has not made that clear publicly. From what I understand from people who know him, and I think this has been published in other places with sources, Mr. Sources, that he wants to coach and not GM. That at this stage of his life in his 70s, it's too much to have both jobs. So I just offer that piece of information for you, whether or not you've heard it, read it, or seen it. I give that to you for something to digest and chew on. Big Blue says tackling and penalties. All right, Big Blue, I'm glad you brought this up because I've got my paperwork and I want to mention something to you, okay? The Giants, according to Sports Radar, again, a data service that many NFL teams use, the Giants have 76 missed tackles. That is tied for the 12th most in the NFL. So they're in the middle third of the league in terms of missed tackles. They're at 76. New Orleans, by the way, you're going to love this because they are playing the Saints on Sunday, has 84 missed tackles, which is the 8th most missed tackles in the league. I just thought I'd mention that to you while we're on the topic. In fact, their leading missed tackler, if you will, is Taylor, the safety, who's got 13 missed tackles on the season. And the corner, Alante Taylor, 13 missed tackles on the season, leads the Saints, and I believe, let me just double check my notes here as I go through them. He is tied for 6th in the NFL for most missed tackles with 13. The Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, that he is a safety, 12 missed tackles, tied for 11th most in the league, according to Sports Radar. So, for what it's worth, I think the Saints can appreciate the missed tackle problem even more than the Giants can. Now, penalties. Big Blue, this is so incredibly interesting, and I've been trying to tell people this for a few weeks. I don't know if we've talked about it on this program. I know we've talked about how I invented a new word for the Giants. They are unclutch. You've all heard me say that now for weeks, months in fact. Let me give you a little stat about the penalties. The Giants have had 71 penalties marked off against them this year. That is tied for the 8th fewest amounts of marked off penalties in the National Football League. Let me repeat that. 71 penalties marked off against the Giants this year, tied for the 8th fewest marked off penalties of any team in the NFL. So they are in the bottom third of having penalties go against them. But why do the penalties continue to stick out like a sore thumb? And by the way, they had a season-high 13 penalties marked off against them last week against Dallas for almost 100 yards. How ridiculous is that? Why does the penalty number just gall you to no end? It's because they have come at the most critical times. That's why. Because this team is unclutch. I go back to that word. Because the amount of penalties, wouldn't you take it every year if you're in the lower third of the league in the amount of penalties called against you? I think you would sign up for that every single season. So it's not the amount of penalties that have helped drown this team. It's when. Wiping off significant plays. They've lost some touchdowns on penalties this year. They've had some big plays, some first downs wiped out. they've had penalties marked off against them that gave the other team first downs. That's the problem. Unclutch. Not the amount of penalties, but when they've come. That's the issue with the penalties. All right, Christine says, that would be fun to see if Locke is ready. Well, again, I think Drew Lock took a small step forward last weekend, or Thanksgiving week. How much of another step can he take on Sunday? Well, we should remind you that the Saints on the season are 4-9. Their defense is healthy. Their offense is kind of banged up, but their defense is healthy. They've given up 23 points a game, just like the Giants have. Okay, so that gives you a little perspective. They just lost the other day to the Rams after beating the Falcons and the Browns in back-to-back weeks. But, prior to that, 3, 6, 7, they were on a 7-game losing streak. Right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So, and they're 4-8. They're not 4-9. They're 4-8. I apologize. So, this is certainly a team that, in terms of average yards per game, they rank 30th in the National Football League. Over 380 yards a game allowed by this Saints defense. 29th in NFL defense against the pass at about 250 yards a game. So, Christine, I know what we've said so many times before. We looked at the opponent's bruises and their Achilles heels, and we've said, the Giants should be able to attack that, and that should be one of their paths to victory. And then usually what happens on that game day? It doesn't work out at all. And for whatever reason, the team fixes the problem or the Giants just can't attack it. So while I agree with you, this actually shapes up like a game where Drew Lock might be able to take another step forward and flourish. It's certainly set up for him statistically, but I haven't the foggiest idea of whether or not it's going to happen. Predicting anything with the New York Giants this year is fool's gold. It just makes absolutely no sense to do any predictions regarding what's happening with this team. Like I say, somebody's sitting in a basement with a voodoo doll and they just keep sticking pins in it. And who knows? All right. Big Blue says, Theo showed signs of Bavaro and Shockey versus Dallas. No. Big Blue, please don't go there. Please don't do that. I know you're a longtime fan, but as a longtime fan, you got to hold Bavaro and Shockey to a much higher level than this rookie from Penn State, who, yes, he's got athleticism. Yes, I think he's got better hands than what he's shown this year. I think I have him with 4 drop passes, which is too many for the amount of throws that he's had, or catches that he's had as well. But I think he's an exciting player with an exciting upside. Yes, he's certainly a terrific athlete. He's fluid, and he certainly has the mentality to want to be really good. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. But just because in Dallas, and by the way, I gave him a game ball on our Game Balls and Gassers program last Friday because I thought in the fourth quarter, when he had 4 of his 5 receptions on the day, including 3 on a touchdown drive, I thought he showed the ability to drag some defenders and push the pile, and also showed some athleticism to avoid some defenders. So I get it. It was a nice flash on one drive in the fourth quarter of a game. But when you start throwing around names like Bavaro and Shockey, you're kind of going out of bounds there for me, Big Blue. Let's see what he can do over a full season, over the course of the next 3 and 4 years, before we start talking about him as one of the star tight ends in franchise history. Because let's not kid ourselves. When you talk about the premier tight ends in this organization's 100 years, you're talking about Mark Bavaro, you're talking about Jeremy Shockey, and you're talking about Bob Tucker. Okay? Theo Johnson right now does not belong in the same sentence with those three guys. But I am excited about his upside. And I hope that we see some really good stuff out of him next year. Christine says she feels awful for Theo. He was making strides. There's no question. She also says it's heartbreaking to hear about the captain's injuries. Yeah, well, I mean, Casey Kreider, the long snapper, is like the only captain still left who hasn't been hurt or discarded in some way or shape or form. All right. Tank Pariam says, what do we got here? I think it's time to find a left tackle. The best ability is availability, and there's no doubt about that. We've heard that phrase uttered throughout all sports for decades. It's been 2 seasons. We can't say he's one of the best if he is not on the field. Tank, here's what I will say to you. I think patience on his durability is certainly starting to wear thin. There is no doubt when he plays, he is a top-notch, front-line NFL left tackle. Andrew Thomas, of course, is who we're talking about. Now, let me just take a quick look at something here. So far in his career, you know, I like to just double check on these things. I don't want to just speak out of turn. Andrew Thomas has started 15, 13, 16, 10, and 6 games over his 5-year NFL career. Last year and this year being the 2 seasons, obviously, where he's missed the most. So yes, is it starting to become a concern? No doubt. Let me see his age. How old is Andrew Thomas? He is a little bit almost 26 years old. This is a league where it is not rare, but actually rather kind of common for starting offensive linemen to play into their mid to late 30s. It can happen. So, number one, you sign Andrew Thomas to a lucrative extension already. And number two, going on 26 years old, he's just now getting to touch the prime of his career. So, do I agree? His injury situation needs to be monitored, and you need to be very careful about how you move forward with him. I totally disagree with the opinion that this is the time to move on and decide that you need to start shopping for another left tackle. I could not disagree with that statement more. No, can't do it. Can't do it. We will see how it works out, but you cannot do it. That would not be prudent at this juncture. All right. Queensboro Brother says, losing Dexter Lawrence will demote our defense. Well, it's certainly going to hurt the defense. Come on. Who are we kidding? You know, the guy made one of the all-NFL teams in back-to-back seasons. Excuse me. Has 9 sacks this year, although did not get one in each of his last 5 games. Yeah. The guy gets double teamed at least double teamed on every single snap. Will losing Dexter Lawrence hurt this team? There's absolutely no question. Over the course of the next 5 games, they are going to miss Dexter Lawrence. And not just a little, but a lot. That's a fact. And if I'm any of the teams on the Giants schedule right now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's try to run into the interior of that line. Let's test it and prove, or make the Giants prove, that they can at least contain the rush. Because the Giants, as you know, have done a poor job against the run all year long. Well, without Dexter Lawrence there, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And you're also not going to have as much of a pass rush in the front of the pocket either. So, do I think the Giants defense is going to take some dents? Oh yeah, I do. Which is why I'm not going to be as harsh on them down the stretch. I'm more interested, my microscope is really out on the offense over the last 5 games. More so than it is on the defense. Especially like this week, if you got no Lawrence, no Banks, no Akereke, no Nacho. You know, you're missing just a bunch of guys. And we already know, Ojulari is out for the rest of the season, goes on injured reserve. Well, we don't know if it's for the rest of the season. He's got a toe injury. He's on IR. So, yes, my microscope, I'm more concerned about grading what I see on offense the rest of the way as I prepare for the offseason. I'm not so much looking to beat up on the defense because I know they're taking hits. That's just the way it is. All right. KTS _ SOL boy 621. So I'm not sure exactly how you would say that if you tried to pronounce it. KTSolo boy 621. How about that? We give it a shot, right? He says, clean house, take Ward or Hunter. Well, look, I think I told you guys this last week, and I think I said it on BBKL when I was on with John Schmelk the other day. At this time, and I reserve the right to change my mind, because I always tell people during the combine, I make a decision as to what I would do if I were the Giants. I'm not into predicting what they will do. I tell you what I think I would do if I was in the chair, because I think that's the best way to go about this. Nobody knows exactly what they're thinking, so anybody who predicts is doing nothing more than throwing mud against the wall or going by a rumor or taking a crapshoot at what they're going to do. I will give you my legitimate opinion as to what I would do, what makes the most sense, what's the most logical, based on all of the evidence that I accumulate between cut-ups and between the combine. I say, as I sit here today, I am inclined to be much more agreeable to taking Hunter, if the Giants have the opportunity, than taking a quarterback. I think a bridge quarterback, signing a veteran who will be available to them, much like years ago when they signed Kurt Warner, and he was the bridge between Kerry Collins and Eli Manning. I think the Giants would be much better off, as I sit here today, signing a veteran bridge quarterback and not taking one in the first round. Hunter is an incredible talent, so I would probably take him, although I could be convinced to trade down, especially if the package was right and someone was willing to overpay, which happens a lot in the draft. Same gentleman says this team is terrible. 2022 Giants roster was filled with Gettleman guys. Can't even buy a Shane Guy Giants jersey. Okay, well, here's what I will say. The Giants of 2022 did have a bunch of Dave Gettleman players who, by the way, helped them make the playoffs. And for some reason, there's still a very strong anti-Gettleman feeling amongst the fan base. But it's funny. I believe 9 of the top 10 talents on that team were actually Gettleman picks or Gettleman signings. So yes, I appreciate the fact that you recognize that Dave Gettleman's tenure with the Giants was mixed. It wasn't all bad. There was actually some good that he did. And I know that's not very popular, but he did do some good. There was an awful lot of bad too, as it turned out. It was mixed. That's a fact. That is also the most objective word you could use. In terms of Joe Schoen's drafts, he's had 3 drafts. And while he hasn't drafted a superstar or an all-pro level player, he has drafted an awful lot of either heavy rotation players or starters. So you're right. In terms of buying jerseys, people want to buy jerseys of superstars. Guys who are all pros. There haven't been those. Okay? There haven't been. Even Kayvon Thibodeau hasn't been an all-pro. And Malik Neighbors, he might be on the all-rookie team. I think it's pretty certain he'll be on the all-NFL rookie team at the end of this season. But he's not going to be an all-pro. So that's fair. I think no one's buying Giants jerseys of non-all-pros who have been drafted by this team the last 3 years. But remember, in terms of grading a draft, they always tell you you have to wait 3 years to grade a draft. And if you go back to 2022, which is 3 drafts ago, Joe Schoen drafted 11 players. 9 of those players are still on the team and either have a rotational role or are starters. So in that regard, depends on the type of grade that you're looking for. If you're looking for all pros, you're absolutely right. Doesn't have any. That's fair to say. But it's also fair to say that 9 of his 11 players that he drafted are significant parts of the 53-man roster. You have to actually acknowledge both of those comments. One is more negative, one is more positive. Christine says, I cannot understand how things have gotten this bad of a season for us to be discussing this now. Well, unfortunately, the National Football League only allows teams that have enough W's to get into the postseason. And they don't want to hear about reasons why you did not get enough W's. That's where we're at. There are a number of reasons why. And we talked about most of them during the first third of this season. The Giants gave away at least 4 games to charity. And when you do that in a 17-game season, you put yourself in such a deep hole that you usually cannot climb out of it. Because there'll be, when you're a team that, in terms of roster, is in the middle of that pit of quicksand, you're going to have games where you get blown out, and you're going to have games where you get beat. That's why you're one of the teams in the large pool of quicksand in the NFL. That's why you're not one of the elites. The elites being the Kansas Cities, the Philadelphias, the Detroits. Come on, we all know who the elites are. I don't think I need to have to go over them with you right now. So when you're not one of those who are, up in the trees, you're one of the many teams in the pool of quicksand. Teams in the pool of quicksand are Basically, teams within a game or two over or under 500. And depending upon injuries or circumstances, or fluky plays or officiating calls, on any given week, they will win or they will lose. The NFL calls it parity. I call it quicksand. So, here's the thing. When you throw away games, as the Giants did early in the year, and give games away, you have now put yourself deeper into the quicksand than you needed to. And then when the quicksand naturally starts sucking you down further, all of a sudden you're now up to your neck. Instead of only being up to your stomach, you're now up to your neck. And that's why, Christine, the Giants find themselves where they are today. Had they not given away 4 games earlier this year, let's say they only gave away 1, they'd have 3 more wins. And they'd be 5-7 right now, instead of 2-10. I think it's fair to say if they were 5-7 right now, with 5 games left to play, we could still be talking about how they might be able to do something with the season and how they could still be playing meaningful games into late December. At 5-7, you could still talk about that. 4-8, like the Saints are right now, they're even saying it's real sticky. But 5-7, yeah, you still could have been talking about meaningful games at 5-7. But when you throw games away to charity, like the Giants did earlier in the year, and then you start losing games in the middle of the year when you actually get beat, you are now up to your neck in quicksand. Okay. KTS underscore SOL boy 621 has another thought. He says, Shermer isn't coming back. We need to take from the coaches in Detroit. Well, I don't think the coaches in Detroit are going to be too anxious to leave. Do you? They are Super Bowl contenders. And Dan Campbell has it going over there. I'm a huge Dan Campbell fan because I remember I covered the team when he was backing up Jeremy Shockey as a Giants tight end out of Texas A&M. I'm a big Dan Campbell fan. Always knew he'd be terrific. He was a Parcells favorite. As you remember, he was in Miami for a short time, and Parcells had been an administrator with the Dolphins. I always told Dan Campbell years ago that I hoped one day, if he did go into coaching, that we would see him again in the Meadowlands. And he's still a young man, so maybe someday down the road, because as we all know, unless you're Mike Tomlin, you don't keep a coaching job in one spot for decades after decades after decades. That's just not the way it works in this league. So at some point down the road, Dan Campbell, man, he's something else. Always a big fan. All right. Antonio Vidal. What's up, Paul? How much would you expect Greg Dulcich to play on Saturday? Now, he is a very athletic tight end who I believe was a third-round pick a couple years back. He was just picked up by the Giants off the waiver wire, I believe 2 days ago or a couple of days ago. Anyway, he's been injured throughout his career. It's been a short career, but he's been badly banged up. Nobody disputes his athleticism. He has really, really good tools for a tight end, especially in the passing game. So, how much do I expect him to play? Well, Theo Johnson's out, so Bellinger will start. I don't know. I mean, when Coach Daboll was asked about Dulcich today, He really said, well, let's see how he does this week. He's got a few practices he's got to get under his belt first. But I suppose it wouldn't be out of the question to see him in there for a few snaps. How much? I just don't know. But they're taking a flyer on him, honestly. As you guys know, when a player gets waived, a young player, remember, he's got to be less than 4 years of NFL experience, 4 years or less. Player gets waived, they go in the reverse order of standings in terms of putting in a claim. So the Giants, where they are in the standings, obviously down at the bottom, they had to crack at him. And they scapped him up because this is a young player, who, if he can stay away from injuries, he's got a lot of potential upside. He was viewed as a legit threat at tight end when he came out of school. All right, let's see. G-Man says, Paul, if there's a change of head coach in the offseason, who would be your preferable head coach candidates that would intrigue you? G-Man, I don't even think about that until the end of the season. I appreciate the question, but in truth, you could, just as well as I could, go on the internet and find out who the free agent head coaches are with NFL experience. And you could start there. If the Giants were to make a move at head coach, and as I said earlier in this program, I do believe that John Mara will sit down at the end of the season and hammer it out, and then when he gives everybody an answer, we will then start addressing what questions or comments need to be addressed regarding the coach. So it is premature for me to think about this or to devote any time to it at all. But what I will say is this. I do believe that if I were in the market for a head coach, if I were an NFL franchise, and I'm not even talking specifically about the Giants, because I think this is a general statement that actually envelopes and umbrellas an awful lot of feelings. I would potentially want to get a guy who has had some pelts on his belt, somebody who has been a head coach in the league before, who has won some stuff before, been to the playoffs, and preferably won some playoff games in his career. I would think if I were any NFL ownership in need of a head coach right now, that would be my first criteria. But again, I do not know that the Giants will be looking for one. That's not my call to make. Antonio's back with us again, says, do you have an idea if anyone talked to players in the locker room that did not practice today? I'm not sure I understand the question. In terms of, did the injured players speak to the media? Well, usually when injured players don't practice, they might come through the locker room and they may have something to say or may not. I was not in everybody's locker during the course of the day today. You can only be in so many places at once. I do not remember myself standing with any injured player while someone was talking to him, but I'm sure some of the folks did. Daboll was basically saying, though, that he thought all the guys who did not practice today were more likely week to week while trying to keep the door open just a crack for Sunday. So if that's what you're concerned about, go with the coach's word on that, and that did not sound very optimistic to me. Let's see, what else do we have? Queensboro Brothers says the average scoring points for teams in the league is well over 20 points, and the Giants average well under 20 points. At home, the Giants average 15.3 points per game. Is that the worst in the league? Actually, you know what? I don't have it broken down by home and road. But for the season, the Giants are averaging 15 a game, and that is 32nd in the NFL. The Saints, by the way, are averaging 23 points a game. That ranks 13th in the National Football League. Just as a FYI. I have not broken down the home and road splits on the scoring. That you could probably find on many of the statistical internet sites. Look, my friend, this goes back to why I created the scoring zone statistic. Now, I have not gone back to every NFL team this year and researched all of their trips into the scoring zone. That would take up too much time. It's too cumbersome, and it's ridiculous for me to have to do. I just know this, okay? The red zone stat seems a little bit outdated to me. Because of these robo kickers that can boot 70-yarders these days, and I exaggerate a tad, but no, really, they can't. They're ridiculous. I just truly believe that you get to the 30, you better have a very high scoring percentage. I'm willing to give you a little slack that maybe you don't get into the end zone. But man, oh man, you got to have points. You get to the other team's 30, you better at least get a field goal out of it. You cannot be walking back the other way and throwing your defense on the field with no points to show for it when you get inside the other team's 30. To me, that number, that percentage, has to be really, really high. And that's why I say to you, okay? That's why I say to you that the 15 points a game, yeah, that's worse than the league, 32. I get that. But here's the problem. Look, I'm going to give you a couple of numbers. And this may illustrate it. Now, we know the Giants are among the NFL leaders in terms of minimum 10-play drives. Well, if you're doing 10-plus play drives, that means you're controlling the ball, you're controlling the line, and you're doing enough to move the ball down the field effectively. Otherwise, you'd have a ton of 3-and-outs. Giants are 15th in the NFL in rushing at 115 yards a game. 37% on third down conversions is 21st. So they're right there on the borderline of being, the third tier. There's no question. That needs to be better. But neither of those stats is at the bottom. But why are they at the bottom in scoring? It's because when they get inside the scoring zone, they do things to shoot themselves in the foot, and they come up empty. That's why. That's why the red zone number doesn't do anything for me. I'm more concerned about the scoring zone because 30-yard line, you got to kick a field goal. If you want the Giants' red zone number, I'll give it to you. Giants in the red zone. I have that here. I've got that in my paperwork here too. Giants in the red zone. Red zone number, by the way, in case you people didn't know this, when the NFL quotes a red zone percentage, that's the touchdown efficiency. What they're telling you is how many times the team got to the other team's 20 or in and scored a touchdown. So the Giants are at 42% in red zone efficiency, which is 32nd in the league. Obviously. That's why I do the scoring zone at the 30, because I think that's even more indicative and more damning about how this offense has not done what it needed to do to finish off drives and get points on the board. Let me go back to this for a second, right? So if the Giants have 15 touchdowns on 49 trips inside the red zone, right? So let's do the math on that. 15 on 49. So what is there, if you go by the NFL's math, which again, they use touchdowns on trips inside the 20. I'm going to go touchdowns on trips inside the 30. Okay? And my number was 15 on 49. All right, so we get out the calculator and we go 15 on 49. And we have 31%. Are you kidding me? 31%. It's unbelievable how many times they're in range to score points, and for whatever reason, turnover, sack, penalty, missed field goal, they don't score points. That's what it is. That's what it is right there. What do they do with the ball when they're in the other team's territory? They don't do enough with it there. Christine says she likes the word unclutch. Yeah, well, it's the only word that I could describe for these New York Giants in 2024. They are unclutch. Oh my goodness, Christine, what did you do here? You put us up with a huge star. Wow. Happy belated Thanksgiving to all the followers and myself, and happy Thanksgiving leftovers to you too. Thankful. Oh my goodness, we'll put a big thank you, Christine, here on the board. We'll write this right in here because I know people can see this chat. So we're going to do that. I got to move back a little bit so I can get to the keyboard. There you go. Wow, that is overly generous. That is just dynamite. Much, much appreciated. It's funny when the Sports Illustrated people came to me and asked me about doing this program. And I said to them, well, I do a lot of Big Blue Kickoff live shows during the course of the week, during the day, with the Giants website. I said, I'm not sure. Is there a nighttime audience for a show like this? And if there is, what are going to be their interests? Do they want to know about the game? Do they want to know about the idiosyncrasies and the details? Are they going to like to hear about the spreadsheets that I construct? Are they going to like to hear some of the very unique stats that I like to keep, the drops and stuff, and sack charts and all this other stuff? Are they going to be okay with that? And I didn't know. I didn't know if there'd be an appetite for this kind of program at night. I know a lot of people at lunchtime love the program because they're on a break, and it takes them away from work, and they can have a sandwich or a slice of pizza, whatever it is that you guys like to nosh on, hot dog, a cup of yogurt, whatever it is. But I didn't know. I didn't know that this nighttime program would have a really cool following. So I appreciate it. And Christine, you certainly aces for sure. And again, very, very much appreciate you contributing to the program. It certainly humbles me very much that somebody would be so interested in what it is that we're doing. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Gary Gaston says, P-Dot, I think he means P-D-O-T, right? P-Dot, as so many people know me from all my years on WFAN. I don't think we are far away. One good draft and free agency. Look at Washington and Denver, rookie quarterback and good pickups in coaching. Gary, I tend to agree with you because what is the number now? I think the number is, and don't quote me on this because it has become irrelevant as the Giants have slipped down, into the lower portions of the league. But I believe the number before this season was that in each of the previous 5 years, there was a 5-team turnover in the NFL playoff pool, which is what the NFL wants. Right? They call it parity. You constantly have a handful of teams every year who did not make the playoffs last year who will make the playoffs next year. The Giants were one of those teams in 2022. So yes, if you subscribe to and believe in what Joe Shane said during the course of the bye, the Giants are just one of those teams that's been unfortunate, that's been stuck in that quicksand and is now up to their necks. But really, they should be better off than they are. And I think you agree based on the fact that you don't give away 4 games to charity, you're in much better shape. Remember, if you're 5-7, I'm going to go with just 3. Make it 3 of the 4 games. If you're 5-7, you're just one reversal of a decision away from being a 500 team. So, Gary, with just a little bit of luck and with a few catch the ball in key spots, just a few of those, you got yourself another 3 wins. Easy. Easy. Just make a play. Or don't commit the penalty. Or don't give up the sack. I think that's what's so frustrating about this season is they gave away so many gifts. So, yes, Gary, do I think, the Bill Parcells mantra, you are what your record says you are? I've said this before. It's the only mantra, and I got a billion of them from Coach Parcells. It's the only one I don't agree with. I do think there are different levels of teams, especially because of the NFL is constructed the way it is. They want parity. Okay? That's what they've designed all the rules in this league to create parity, to create a constant churn of playoff teams each and every season. I believe you can have different levels of teams that have the same amount of victories. Not every 5-5 team is created equal. Not every 3-7 team is created equal. No, they're not. They're just not. I'm sorry. When you look at those teams, you look at the average age of the roster. Is there upside with youth? Or is there downside because the roster's already tapped out because they got a bunch of old guys on the team that have already peaked out and are on the downside? You have to look at that. That's what makes a team with the same record better than the other team or worse than the other team. How else? Contract status. Team A is 5-5. Team B is 5-5. Team B has 7 starters that are going to be free agents at the end of the year. Team A has 1. Yeah, I get it. As far as the NFL is concerned, they're both 5-5. That's how they're going to be judged if they're going to get the door opened into the postseason. Sure, I get it. Wins and losses count. Sure. But which team is in better shape moving forward? No question. The team that's got 1 free agent as opposed to the team that's got 6. It makes a difference. And that's just 2 examples. There are many other examples I could give you. I could be here for another half hour, but I want to take the rest of these chats. There are many reasons why teams with identical records are not the record that they says they are. Yeah, the NFL says they are what the record says they are. The league says that in terms of handing out playoff tickets. Absolutely, Coach Parcells. I love the man. Hall of Famer, legend, was one of my mentors in terms of football. Learned a lot from the man. But that statement does not hold water in today's game especially. There's too much parity, too many teams swimming in the quicksand. They are not all the same, even if they have the same record. Christine says, team still has big holes to fill. There are some. There's no doubt. There are some. Gary says he agrees, but if you make the right moves with the last place schedule in 2025, you could be streaky. Well, see, Gary, Here's the thing, and Christine, both of you. I truly believe, as I said before, and I'm sticking with it right now, that's why I am favoring the bridge quarterback. Favor the bridge quarterback who's had some success in this league and has won some games. Do what they did with Kurt Warner back in 2004. Kurt Warner got the Giants to a 5-4 record, and many veterans on that team, and I was there, so I know, they thought that that team was going to compete for a wild card and had a really good chance to make the playoffs. Now, Tom Coughlin, knowing that his offensive line wasn't very good, that Warner held the ball too long, too often, and used to have a lot of trouble with fumbleitis, he decided that, you know what, it's going to be better for the franchise going into next year if we get Eli Manning some experience now and jumpstart him and start him ahead of the curve so that next year the Giants can make the playoffs. And that's exactly how it worked out. If Manning had not gotten to play the last third of that season or whatever it was, well, they were 5-4. If Manning had not gotten to play down the stretch and experienced all the bumps and bruises and the knowledge and everything that he was able to glean, the Giants would not have been a playoff team in 2005. So, in retrospect, Coach Coughlin was correct in doing what he did. And of course, what happened? Kurt Warner, with the one-year contract and a player option for year 2, knew all along that Manning was going to be the guy at some point, and he would opt out at the end of his 1 year with the Giants and just wanted to resuscitate his career. Well, he did. Went to the Arizona Cardinals and took them to the Super Bowl and consequently got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But Kurt Warner played well for the Giants. Again, he had them at 5-4. The Giants need another one of those. They need to go, I believe, go after a veteran bridge quarterback who can get them some wins and put them in position to be a solid football team next year. I don't think you hand the reins to a rookie quarterback in 2025. I don't think that's a good recipe. Not for this team. All right. Let's see. Christine and Gary are having a little bit of a chat over here on the side. And Christine says, cornerback, please, or interior defensive line. Sure. Christine, here's the thing. Okay? The Giants, right now, as I look at it, I don't think there's any doubt that they've had some underachievers who, for whatever reason this year, maybe didn't blossom and get their game to the next level like they wanted them to. So you have to figure out which of those guys you still want to count on in 2025 or which of those guys you want to move on from. Now, for example, Andrew Thomas, right? We talked about availability before with him. Andrew Thomas has now been hurt a significant amount of time in each of the last 2 seasons. But see, I'm not giving up on Andrew Thomas if I'm the Giants. Because of his age, because of his contract, I believe there's still a lot of years of great football left in him. So I would not give up on him. Okay? But when you look at other positions on the team, well, you say to yourself, Darius Slayton's in the last year of his contract. Who knows what his future is going to be, so do you need another receiver? You look at Wan'Dale Robinson. His production hasn't been what you were hoping to get out of him. Now, I'm not saying that Wan'Dale Robinson should leave. No, Wan'Dale Robinson should continue to be part of this team. There's no question about that. But I guess the question becomes, was this wide receiver room an underachiever this year as a whole? Neighbors says, what, 75 catches, but he's also dropped 10 passes. This wide receiver room, which was supposed to be incredibly strong and dynamic and deep, I think when you consider Neighbors 75/10 drops, I think that's a bit disappointing, despite what he's done. I think Slayton would tell you he's had a disappointing season. I think Robinson would tell you he's also had a disappointing season. So you have to start thinking about these things. Jalen Hyatt, mysteriously, has had a very disappointing season. I think everybody, even the Giants' harshest critics, thought that the Giants' wide receiver room would be a heck of a lot more productive than it's been this year. So one of the questions you do have to ask yourself now is, how much of an investment do you put in the wide receiver room? You certainly want to put an investment into the cornerbacks. I totally agree with that, Christine. I would not disagree with that at all. And I certainly think you have to put an investment into the defensive tackles. Yes, totally agree with that. So, there are questions you got to answer here. Were guys underachieving in certain rooms, or were guys, do they just flat out need replacements in certain rooms? Okay. Christine says, do you think the NFL needs to take action on helping these players play better football? And she says, with their next comment, injured players. Well, here's the thing. You have a big problem with today's NFL. College coaches are not coaching players up as a minor league system to be great NFL players. Christine, what you have today, because college football has become such a big business, college coaches are interested in one thing: doing whatever they can to win as many games for their program so that the boosters and the alums will lavish them with big money, big contracts, the coaches that is, and job security. The top priority for the bulk of today's NCAA powerhouse Division I coaches, their number one priority is winning games to save their own skin and to generate big bucks for their schools. Their number one priority is not to make the best NFL prospects they possibly can. That's why you have so many terrific Heisman Trophy winners, right? Who were great college players, won Heisman trophies, and then got to the NFL, and it turned out they weren't very good players. Because a great college player does not automatically make a great pro player. Sometimes that's because of development. Sometimes that's just because the player topped out at the college level and was unable to make the next step to become a great pro player. But today's college coaches are under more pressure than ever because of the big business that NCAA football has become. We all know about the college football playoff system, right? We all know about NILs and all the stuff that's going on. Well, what do you think that does? That hurts the development of college prospects who want to become pro players. Why do I say that? I'll give you a great example. Let's say you have a player who has the ability to play multiple positions on the defensive line or the offensive line. Or he can play multiple positions at receiver or multiple positions in the secondary. Now, on one hand, you say to yourself, isn't that great? If he can play multiple positions, he's going to be very valuable to the NFL. Well, sure, he's going to be valuable in that you'd love to have him on your 53 because he can do a jack of all trades kinds of things. But chances are, in most cases, he's a jack of all trades and a master of none. Now, why is that? Well, it's because the college coach is trying to win games. He's trying to get to a bowl. He's trying to do everything he can for his program. So he's going to play that guy where the team needs him the most to win the most games he can win, to enhance his own position. He's not going to play the guy at the position he'll be best at in the pros. He's also not going to leave him in one position so that he can hone his skills and become dominant at that one spot. What he's going to do is play him wherever he has to play him, year by year, week by week, and if that means he's got to bounce around everywhere, well, then that's what it means. And that will hinder that college player's overall development. So now, when that kid comes out of college and goes into the NFL, he now needs extra tutelage and extra polishing if he's going to excel at one particular position. And in the NFL, with the CBA and the labor laws that don't allow you to have the kinds of practices that truly develop these players, guess what? There's a good chance that player will not develop and reach his maximum potential because he lost all that developmental time when he was in that college program helping to line the coffers for that college head coach. That's how it works, folks. So, Christine, I hate to say this, but the system that we have between the free agency system, the salary cap system, and the way that the NCAA football programs, especially the D1 powers, have become more business than sport. All of this stuff together has helped to deteriorate the process and make it that much harder for many players to maximize their potential in the National Football League. It's a shame, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Big business is big business. And you just have to be able to deal with it and chew on it. And do the best that you can with the rules that you've been given. Sean Jackson says, hello, Paul. Enjoy your podcast. Well, I enjoy having you part of the program, Sean. All right, I like Andrew Thomas, but agree with Tank about Thomas's durability issues. Giants need to look into a young tackle insurance for Andrew injury, Neil slow development. All right. This is why the Giants signed Jermaine Illuminor. He's got the ability to play guard. He's got the ability to be the starting right tackle. And he also has the ability to be a functional left tackle if you need him there. That's why Illuminor was such an important facet of their free agent shopping list this past season. And he is young enough that he can give you several more years. So I don't necessarily believe that they have to go there. Do I think it wouldn't be a bad idea if they, at some point, try some new faces and add some tackle depth? You could certainly make that case. But to actually be looking for, quote, the next left tackle, no. I'm not on board with that at all. I think Thomas is the guy. You rely on him, and you know that you want to keep Illuminor around because he can be that guy if you need him to be. And, okay, so Illuminor is not an all-pro. You know, Jumbo Elliott wasn't an all-pro either. And if you remember, he won a Super Bowl with the Giants during the 1990 season. I mean, that's just the way it goes. You don't have to have an all-pro there. So I think they've already covered that base. That's why Illuminor was so critical to them. They had to sign Illuminor during this past offseason. Two Giants goofballs comes in with a chiming. He says here, considering how bad this roster is that needs an asterisk, how many 22 and 23 picks would be on a good roster? Solid class in 24, but definitely not the prior two. Well, I disagree. And that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. I think the 9 players that are still on the roster from the 22 draft are, as I said, all at least rotational players, and you have several starters. Amongst that list, you also have a number of fellas who have not reached their potential, primarily because of injury. So, no, I happen to have a different viewpoint than you do on that, but you're entitled to have that. We can agree to disagree. Christine says, Neil injured as well again. Yes, indeed. I know. It's unbelievable. And yes, you say he played bad in the Dallas game. That was certainly the worst of his 3 games. And for many snaps, and I didn't count exactly how many, he had to deal with Micah Parsons, who, no question, is an all-star player. Again, when people talk about him in the pantheon of greats, and they try to put him in the same category as LT, that's where I just get nauseous. But is he a all-star caliber player at this time? No question. And yes, Evan Neal had the least productive of his 3 games that he's played so far. But his first 2, I thought he was solid, especially in the run game. So I'm not giving up on Evan Neal yet at all. I said that before he got into the lineup, and I said just wait until he gets in there, and I think he's going to be okay. First 2 games he was. Last game wasn't as good. I get it. But again, that's why it's so crippling to see him get hurt now. Because Evan Neal is another guy who needs to play as many games down the stretch as possible. Because this is his chance to show and to prove that, yes, you need to think of me in a positive light going into the offseason. This is his chance to do that. And if he can't play, that's not good. But even worse is if he tries to play hurt and then performs badly. Because as you know, nobody wants to give anybody any rope or any leeway if they play hurt. They just want to crush the guy because, he gave up 3 sacks and 8 pressures according to some analytics chart. Okay, well, did you know that he's got a really bad hip and could barely move? And he went out there and tried to play and tried to be gutsy and tried to take one for the team? Well, that doesn't matter. Okay, fine. So you see the problem? The guy's dealing with a bum hip now, and if he sits out, he can't help himself. If he goes in and plays hurt, he's obviously not going to help himself. It's a tough position for him to be in. I, for one, am rooting for the guy. I hope that he misses 1 game, gets himself back on a healthy track, and then finishes out the season with positive performances each and every week. That's what would be the best thing for the Giants. And you have to look at it through the lens of the franchise. What's best for the team? Well, it's best for the team when these guys who are in a questionable situation produce and give you positive answers. That's always best for the team. Then it means that's one less need they have to go get. All right. Billboards builds. Paul, love your insight, your podcast and your insight. I'm wondering if Shane and Daboll stay. They will likely get rid of both. The OC and DC, are there going to be any quality coaches willing to come here? All right. First of all, Brian Daboll's calling the plays right now. So even though Mike Kafka is the offensive coordinator and he called the plays the first 2 years of the administration, Brian Daboll's been calling the plays this year. The offense, as we've discussed, has not produced nearly to the level that it was supposed to. Brian Daboll has said time and time again he loves calling the plays and really enjoys doing it. So I would guess, I'm not going to assume, and I don't like to put myself in somebody else's mind. I'm going to assume that Brian Daboll is not going to change the play calling responsibilities. He hasn't done it this year, and I suspect that he will want to continue calling plays next year too. What that means for Mike Kafka, I don't know, but it's pretty hard to hold him responsible for any negative thoughts you might have about the play calling this year since he's not doing it. So that's the OC question. The DC question is Shane Bowen. Giants defense has certainly not lived up to its billing. They started out like a house of fire in terms of their red zone defense, their third down defense, their sack numbers. Those were all really, really good. They led the league in sacks a number of weeks in a row. So that was wonderful. On the negative side, they've been gashed in the running game far, far too often. And it happens continuously. Now, on the variable section of that comment, they've got one interception all season. One stinking interception. Now, all players will tell you, yes, you can create your own luck to some degree, but they'll all say that turnovers come in bunches. And as John likes to tell me all the time on BBK, well, you can't count on turnovers because you never know. They're lucky. They're going to even out over time. I think the Giants were something like plus 12 or plus 14 in takeaway ratio last year. And right now, I think they're minus 2. Let me see. No, they're minus 8. They've given away 17 and they've accumulated 9. So they're at minus 8, which, by the way, puts them tied for 28th in the league. So last year, they were amongst the leaders in takeaway ratio. This year, they're down all the way near the bottom, which, if you believe in the law of averages and you believe that turnovers are primarily circumstantial, if you believe that, well then, how do you quantify their lack of production in that stat? Because one could just reason that it's evened out after what happened last year. So the DC question is a very, very difficult one to answer because you have to figure out how much stock and how much weight are you going to put into those different factors that we just talked about. Now, are there any quality coaches willing to come here? That was the last part of his question. Billboards, there's one thing I can tell you. I don't talk to a lot of coaches who are active around the league during the season. Sometimes I'll see some coaches who I've known from the past at the combine, and I'll chat with them. But there's no way for me really to honestly answer that last question because I don't know. That's the one thing, folks, I do hope that you appreciate on this program is that I'm not going to smoke you and I'm not going to, give you some kind of pandering answer. If I honestly don't know the answer to a question and it's just not there, I'll tell you. I'll tell you if I can look it up or if I can find it or if I can ask somebody. And if that's something that's available that can be had, I'll do my best to go get it. But there are some questions like this. I have no idea if the Giants were looking for any new staff members, who they would even look at or who would be available or who would want to come here. And anybody who says that they do or writes speculative articles of that ilk, they're just blowing smoke at you. Seriously, I won't do that. I have too much respect for viewers and listeners than to give them clickbait or blow smoke at you. I will not do that. Christine says, how about cornerback coach not doing well with these young players? Well, here's what I will say. Jerome Henderson is a very well-respected coach from around the league, and I know that from my experience in this league and also knowing as many people as I do and watching him on a daily basis. Jerome Henderson is an outstanding defensive backs coach. We've talked about the fact that Deonte Banks needs to polish up his game and needs to be, needs to grow a little quicker. But that's something within him. That's not something that Coach Henderson can necessarily snap his fingers about. Cordell Flott, I believe, has played better and better. But again, he has been hurt a lot during his early career, and that inhibited his development and his progress. But I do think that Cordell Flott has a nice set of skills. I think that Drew Phillips has been sensational this year by anybody's metric as a rookie slot. You got to give Coach Henderson credit for that. So, Dory Jackson, he was a free agent. They brought him back as veteran insurance. He's had to play some. His play has been very up and down, very inconsistent. But I think we all know that he's on the back nine of his career. So, no, Christine, I would not look at DB coach Jerome Henderson in a negative light at all. I actually look at him in a very positive light. I hope somehow you're able to see that. Oh, she says that would be awesome about Dan Campbell. She's a big Dan Campbell fan too. Look, I'm sure Dan Campbell's probably got another 25 years of coaching in him. I'm sure he does. Let me see how old Dan is. I honestly don't know that. Let me take a look. Dan Campbell is how many years old? Let's see. Dan Campbell is 48 years old. All right, so let's say he's got another 25 years of coaching in him. I could see Dan Campbell coaching into his early 70s. That's not unlike NFL guys to do that these days. So if Dan Campbell's got another 25 years of head coaching left in his bio, I don't think it's out of the question to think that at some point during those 25 years, he might wind up landing with the Giants. And that's not a tampering comment for anybody out there who wants to say, oh, you're tampering, talking about somebody else's coach. I got to think that if you had to realistically project Dan Campbell's next 25 years, it's remotely possible that he's going to be coaching the Lions for another 25 years. I have to believe that at some point in the next 25 years, he will be available. And I know of his affection for the Giants organization. Like I said, he came in as a player here. And I don't know. I just always thought he'd be a good fit at some point down the line. All right, let's see. Okay. Billboard's Bills. Who has the final say on the GM and head coach? John Mara, Steve Tisch, or is it collaborative between them? Ownership, Mara and Tisch families will have the final say on the general manager. The general manager has the final say on the head coach, although there is input from ownership, as I understand it. That's about the only answer that I have. Because while I believe the GM, has a tremendous amount of decision-making power in the head coach's realm, ownership absolutely will have their say as well. So that is not an individual situation. There is a certain amount of collaboration involved in that one. Okay, Sean Jackson. Paul, how are the Giants able to build such a good O-line in the earlier 2000s? Snead, Deal, McKenzie, O'Hara, Soybert. Yet 10 plus years later, the Giants have failed to draft well, develop a good O-line. Sean, I love the question. There are so many things that can sidetrack a player. Sometimes you just made a mistake and you brought in a guy who wasn't good enough. Other times, you brought in a guy who gets hurt and doesn't reach his potential. Other times, you bring in a guy who's got a terrible attitude, and it turns out he doesn't want to work, doesn't want to do what he's supposed to do. And I'll give you a great example. Eric Flowers, #1 draft pick, okay? Came in here, and at one point they asked him if he'd be willing to try playing guard. He refused. So the Giants cut him, because he wasn't working out at tackle. Realizing that his NFL career was being hung by a piece of dental floss, he then went to 2 other teams, I believe Washington and Miami, and said, okay, I'll play guard, out of desperation to stay in the league. Now, maybe if Eric Flowers had told the Giants, had a good attitude, and was willing to play guard for them, maybe they could have had him for 5 productive seasons. But instead, you had a player that did not want to do that. This is what happens sometimes. Sometimes it is coaching. Sometimes, for whatever reason, the position coach and the player, they don't see eye to eye, and they just don't connect, and the guy doesn't get the most out of him. Pat Flaherty was the Giants offensive line coach during those successful Super Bowl teams that you're talking about. Pat currently works at Rutgers, working with their offensive line. There can be so many reasons. But here's the thing that's funny. If you've looked at the last decade, the Giants have brought in so many linemen. So many. Draft and free agency. Both ways. They have brought in. You know what I'm going to do? Sean, I want you to hold me to this. It's going to take forever to count them all up. But maybe if I get the chance, I should have done this during the bye week, but I just didn't feel like it was necessary because the offensive line question is kind of passé right now. The quarterback situation's a heck of a lot more important than the offensive line situation. So I kind of didn't bother doing it during the bye. But maybe I'll do it even during the off season. I want to count up how many different offensive linemen weren't just drafted, but how many offensive linemen were signed. So how many different offensive linemen faces have come through the doors of the Giants over the last decade and even been given a chance to start? And you would find that they have tried hand over fist. They've climbed to the top of Mount Everest trying to find enough quality offensive linemen. And for whatever reason, and each time it seems to be a different reason, heck, you remember when they had guys retire on them during training camp a few years ago? 2 guys just said, I quit. They just gave up. Veteran guys who had a resume in the league of production. And just one day they came in, I retire, I quit. Are you kidding me? Talk about a voodoo doll. Man. So that would be a very interesting chart to do. It really would. Go over how many number 1 and number 2 draft choices there have been, as well as all the different free agents that were brought in and given a chance. The list is as long as a roll of paper towels. I guarantee it. They have tried every which way but loose to find these guys. At least now they have one that's somewhat functional. It was better earlier in the year. It's still functional right now. You know, it's functional. Somewhere in that middle third, I think, is fair. Probably the lower part of the middle third. But it's certainly better now than it has been in quite a long time. All right, Sean. Let's see here. We have Matto. Daboll coaching has destroyed this team. This is not Joe Shane's fault. Remember, Shane doesn't coach. Again, that's Matto. It's a matter of opinion. Everyone's entitled to have one. You don't get to make that decision, nor do I. Joe Shane will be the primary man who's going to offer significant input on this, and then the ownership is going to have their say as well. Let's see here. Sean says, Sean Jackson's back with us here with another comment. 49ers, Eagles, Lions, Ravens, Dallas before this season have been able to build strong O-lines. Why can't the Giants build a good O-line like those other franchises? Is it our scouting, eval, etc.? Sean, as I said, it could be a variety of reasons. You know, it really can. I mean, think about those guys that you mentioned before, right? McKenzie was a free agent signing. Deal was a mid-round draft choice. O'Hara was a free agent signing. Richie Seubert was an undrafted rookie free agent. And Chris Snee was a second-round pick. Think about that. The Giants did not spend a first-round pick on any of those starting 5 offensive linemen in the 2007 Super Bowl. In 2011, well, remember they had David Boss, and he had gotten hurt, and Kevin Booth. Now, David Boss was a free agent they signed from San Francisco. I thought he was an underachiever. I'm not, just to be polite. I know he had some injuries, but he wasn't a great answer. In fact, I thought the team actually did better in the second half of the season when Kevin Booth had to come in and play center. And Kevin Booth, okay, do I need to remind you? They picked him up off the scrap heap after he was discarded by the Raiders. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, how do you answer that? How do you answer that? How do the Giants find a way to secure top-notch quality offensive linemen when they have drafted tons of them, they have signed even multiple tons of them, and over the years, this has continued to be a problem? How in the world do you answer that? Heck, I'm trying to think. Will Beatty was a second-round pick. And he started most of the season in 2011. Because Boss got hurt and Booth moved in to play center the second half of that year. Will Beatty played at least more than half the season at left tackle. And he was a second rounder. So, to just reiterate, the Giants did not use a first-round pick on any of their starting 5 linemen in 2007 or 2011. And I can honestly tell you, I hadn't really thought much about that before, but that's the truth. 2 Super Bowls, and they did not use a first-round pick on an O-lineman. Yet, since that time, look at the first-round linemen they have taken. And they haven't been able to do anything other than one playoff win. So how do you put logic to that? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Sean, it is a mystery. I know this, that since Pat Flaherty has been gone, they've gone through a large handful of offensive line coaches. That I can tell you. I mean, and some guys who I know had credentials. I wish there was an easy answer for that one, Sean, but once again, I'm going to let my honesty take over and tell you I truly don't know. It's a mystery. Okay, Drake says, I'm at work now viewing this. Okay, Drake. I appreciate you for being with us. Actually, I see your comment came in, holy smokes, almost an hour ago. I've been taking a long time getting through these chats. Again, I love phone calls more than I love chats, and the chats just keep piling up. But I really do want to make an effort. I want to make a concentrated effort to get to as many of your comments and questions as I possibly can. The trouble is, a lot of times, the answers aren't 5-second answers. They really deserve more than a 5-second answer. You know, so many people complain on Twitter, like, why don't I give them enough of answers on Twitter? You know why? Because the NFL, you got to peel back sometimes 7 layers of the onion. You've got to pick apart 25 strands of the spider web to give people the complete and honest answer. You can't do that on Twitter, where you get taken out of context all the time, and you write out a simple sentence, and because people don't understand the other 4 paragraphs that go with it that you don't have room to write, then they'll crucify you for the one sentence that you wrote. Anyway, Queensboro brother, I'm going to be honest like you, Paul. I'm frustrated with this offense. Everybody is. To change the subject and focus on something I love dearly, food. What makes the sauce better than ever? Wow. You know, that's a good one because my wife makes great sauce, okay? And she's not even Italian. She's actually German. But she learned to be a fantastic cook, especially of Italian food, from her family, even though they were not Italian. I know, it's amazing. I don't understand how that happened, but it happened. I will tell you, and this is, again, being honest, I stay out of the kitchen when she is doing her thing. Why? Because I'm a mess in the kitchen. Okay? Now, I know we're not... You guys know about that former heavyweight champion boxer who had the grill? I know you know who I'm talking about. He has a name. He was an Olympic champion, then a heavyweight champion, and he had the grill, which became one of the greatest inventions in the history of mankind. Well, if I can cook it on the grill, if I can make it on a submarine wooden pallet and make a sandwich, specifically Italian subs, I can make it in a microwave, or I can just boil it on the stove. I'm okay. I'm what's known as a game manager in the kitchen. Okay? That's it. And I know I'm a game manager. So I'm not throwing the ball 60 yards downfield and looking for that bomb for a touchdown. No, no. I'm a game manager. I'm handing it off and I'm throwing a screen pass. I know. I love my food. I love my authentic foods, but I don't get involved in the preparation of them. So once again, Queensboro brother, you guys, you ask me a question, I'm giving you an honest answer. Nothing is better than awesome homemade Italian sauce, but I stay away from the preparation of it. That's how it gets to be so good, is that I get out of the way. All right. Matto says DeVito should have started the beginning of the season. Well, again, you can have your opinion, Matto. I don't know that anybody would agree with that with any sense of logic or rationale. But if you'd like to believe that or think that, I will let you do so. Queensboro brother says he's back with me. Sorry, my thumb hit the send button. The culprit might be my new job with the 6 a.m. start. Oh my goodness. Okay. No, hey, the question was fine. I had no problem with the question. Like I said, I'm an open book, folks. I'm going to be real with you. I love to break through the wall. I'm not one of these guys who wants to be a newscaster and be very prim and proper. And it's like, no. I love what I do, and I love talking to people, and I love talking football. So, no, it's all cool. It's all cool. Timothy Manet says, Paul, how do we fix this run defense? And by the way, we've already gone over 2 hours tonight. And we have over 1,000 live viewers on the program right now. So I will attempt to take this thing till the top of the hour and give you another 20 more minutes. And folks, any of you who joined late, see the link down at the bottom of the screen. You can come on and give me a video call if you'd like. Block your camera out and give me a audio call if you like. Or you can be part of the chat. Okay? We're here every Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we talk Giants football. All right, Timothy says, how do we fix this run defense? You know how hard that's going to be to do right now? If Bobby Okereke, Dexter Lawrence, Nacho are all amongst those players who were not available for this game against Alvin Kamara and the New Orleans Saints. Now, Kamara, just for your own edification, just so you have an idea, I don't know if you've been following the Saints much this year. Got my trusty paperwork here handy. Kamara has 3 100-yard games this season. Ran for a season-high 155 against Carolina. And he's averaging over 4 yards a carry. 7th in the NFL in rushing this year at well over 600 yards. Is that right? Oh, I'm sorry. Well over 800 yards. My printer was blurry on some of the stuff that I printed out before the show. Actually, I do my stuff early in the week. Monday and Tuesday are my big research days where I dig into all this stuff. So Kamara is obviously going to be extremely happy when he sees that the Giants are forced to play a slew of backups on their interior defense this year. Yeah, he's got almost 900 yards rushing, 6 rushing touchdowns, and averaging a little bit less than 4.5 yards a carry. So they're going to feed him, and they're going to feed him, and they're going to feed him. Why wouldn't you? I mean, Olave's out, Shaheed is out, Taysom Hill is out. Three of their most potent offensive weapons in the passing game are not playing because of injury. So if you're the Saints, you're going to feature Kamara in every way, shape, and form this week. He's going to run it a ton, and he's going to catch it a ton. He's going to need a real good night's sleep after Sunday. Question is, will he be sleeping black and blue because the Giants beat him up? Or will he be sleeping from being exhausted from running up and down the field? That's the question. Elo H. Hey, I think we've had you on the program before, but thanks for coming back. Why do the wide receivers seem to regress? Hyatt seemed promising last year. This year, he can't get on the field. Also, what happened to Hodgins? He was a big part of the 2022 playoff run. Now he's a practice squad guy. All right. Hyatt is a mystery to me. I've said that before. Of the 42 years that I've covered the NFL and the New York Football Giants, Jalen Hyatt's second NFL season is one of the biggest mysteries that I've ever had. He's a great kid. He has ability. He has the want to. Puts in so much time. He was one of the very few players during the entire offseason. Daniel Jones was another one who just couldn't get enough of working on his own at the facility, trying to improve his craft. It boggles my mind, with all the work that he put in, why it has not translated into more opportunities and more production. I am literally, capital F, flabbergasted that Jalen Hyatt has not had more of a breakout season. Flabbergasted. He becomes a significant question going into his third year now. You know, you've got to go 3 years with a draft choice, especially a third rounder. So next year's got to be the breakout year, or otherwise you throw your hands up and you say, uh-oh, this did not work out. Hodgins, after that really strong second half of the 2022 season, when he burst onto the scene after being claimed off waivers from the Bills, did not have a terrific 2023. He just didn't. He's never been a real fast guy, but he's always had good hands, has some length, good work ethic, good size, good route runner, but he had an awful lot of trouble getting open last year. And it was almost like the league caught up to him. Like they were shocked and surprised at who he was when he helped the Giants make the playoffs. And once the NFL figured out who he was and how to defend him, it was like they made an adjustment to him, and it was almost like he could not make that adjustment to keep that level of production steady. And consequently, that's what happened. And the Giants this year, clearly, as you looked at the wide receiver room, they were more interested in getting that room faster. So up and down the entire wide receiver roster on the 53, they had more speed. That's why Allen Robinson, who was here during training camp, wound up leaving the Giants and not sticking around. I don't even know if he's still stuck with the Detroit Lions. Let me see. I don't know. I know he went to the Lions practice squad, I think, after he left the Giants. Yeah, he's still on the Detroit Lions. Oh, my goodness. Wow. He has played in 8 games and only gotten 2 catches for 9 yards on 5 targets. So he really hasn't gotten much of an opportunity at all. And that's a shame. What a professional. A pro's pro. Really enjoyed having him around during training camp. But again, did not have speed. It's clear that the Giants coaching staff prioritized speed in this wide receiver room. And so that left a guy like Robinson out of the mix. And really, Hodgins hasn't really been much in the mix either. Okay. Let's see here. What do we have? Mato comes back with something else. He says Hyatt was not given a fair chance because of Daboll coaching. Daboll isn't doing a good job. Well, here's what I do know, right? I believe that Brian Daboll is like most of the coaches that I've been around in my career, and that is if you earn your snaps during practice, you'll have a chance to do something on the field. Now, for whatever reason, it seems like this year that Hyatt, in Daboll's mind, maybe hasn't earned the snaps. Whenever Daboll's asked about this, what he says is that Hyatt is part of a bunch of packages, and those packages get used based on the matchup that they're going to have that week. The thing that seems kind of odd is that there just never seems to be a lot of use for the packages that Hyatt's in. And I find that remarkable. Again, it's a mystery to me. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it because it truly is one of the very few things in my career that I've never been able to figure out. All right. Sean Jackson comes back with another comment as we're getting caught up here with about 10 minutes left in our program. Paul, is the issue our wide receiver room, or was the bigger issue the mediocre play from our quarterback room? I missed a good quality play from a Giants quarterback. Eli truly spoiled us all because our current quarterbacks aren't cutting it. Okay, let me give you a number, Sean. I'm going to call this up from Sports Radar. Again, they are a statistical data firm. They don't do analytics. They don't do grades. They don't do analysis. They simply do raw data. Now, there is a piece of raw data that Sports Radar has, and I want to give this to you because it's a very interesting stat that goes to your point, okay? And why do I want to give this to you? Well, because I agree that to some degree, all right, passes were not put on the receivers this year with pinpoint accuracy. They love to use the words ball placement, right? Okay. Well, here's what's interesting about that. You don't have to have ball placement to have a catchable football, especially if your receivers are any good. All right. Now, here's what I want to tell you. There is a stat that Sports Radar keeps, and it's called on-target percentage. Sean, I hope you're still with me. I don't know if you dropped out or not, but I hope you're still with me. Sports Radar has a stat called on-target percentage. It is the percentage of on-target throws per pass attempt. It does not include spikes and does not include throwaways. Okay? When they say on target, they're talking about it's a catchable ball. They're not talking about ball placement that's right here at the chest or at the numbers. They're saying it was a catchable ball, which means it was in the radius of the receiver's catching box. Okay? Every offensive coach, every one, and every quarterback, and every receiver, and every running back, and every tight end will tell you if the ball is in the catching box or the receiver's radius and they can get two hands on it, it should be caught. Sean, the New York Giants this year are tied for second in the NFL with an on-target percentage of 80.8%. Let me repeat that one more time. This is not about perfect ball placement. This is about a catchable ball. The leaders are the Miami Dolphins at 83.5%. The Detroit Lions at 80.8%. The Minnesota Vikings at 80.8%. and the New York Football Giants at 80.8%. Think about that, Sean. The Giants tied for second in the NFL in on-target percentage of passes. So I'm a little bit queasy at those people who want to cry bloody murder about, oh, Daniel Jones had poor ball placement during the first half of the season. On-target passing percentage, 80.8% for the New York Football Giants, tied for second in the NFL. And I believe at the time when Jones was released and asked for his release, I believe the number was at 78%, 78 plus. It's now up to 80. They were still in the top 5 when Jones was here. Those are just facts, folks. Okay? That's not emotion talking. That's not an alibi talking. That's a fact. Sean, I'm glad you asked the question. I'm glad I was able to bring that out because we're all about facts on this program. Christine says she truly misses Eli. Absolutely. I think everybody does, if they at least have any common sense about them. But don't worry, you'll get to see him in the Hall of Fame someday soon, I hope. Elo H says, I agree that we should root for Neal. I am for sure. But if he continues to struggle, do you think it's possible he can get moved to guard? I think anything's possible, Elo. I know the Giants believe he's a tackle. I believe he's a tackle. That's where they're trying to make it work right now. It's better for them if he does work at tackle. But the last resort for anybody who is a tackle to see if you can get production out of them is to then ask them to move to guard. So at some point, if it gets to desperation and they feel like it can't work at tackle, if they're sure it can't work, and they're not sure about that yet, but if they do get sure, then you got to say, hey, before you cut the guy, let him have a shot at guard. That's the attitude that you have to take. Again, they asked Will Beatty to play guard. He didn't want to do it. They asked Eric Flowers to play guard. He didn't want to do that either. So sometimes the player doesn't want to. And that's another whole story entirely. Joey, New Yorker back home. Lee Paul, any reason why they might have passed on Caleb Evans from Minnesota, 4th round pick, 22, and Emmanuel Forbes, 1st rounder from 23. Both were young corners with potential, have started some games at boundary corner. Instead, they grabbed a 5th tight end prior to Theo on IR. The only thing I could say, Joey, is that obviously there's scouting reports, because remember, Joe Shane and his scouting staff, they're very big on doing as much data collection as they can on all of the available prospects, and they hold that data collection for when the guys are pro down the road, because then they go to their pro scouts and they say, okay, what did you see? Then they go back to the college scouts and say, all right, what did you see when this kid was coming out in the draft? And then they combine those two conversations and figure out if they want to take the player. So I know Forbes has had a very up and down, checkered short NFL career. I haven't kept track of Evans, to be honest with you. So I don't really want to speak to him. But obviously their reports, whether they were the college reports or the pro reports or both, they did not really like what they saw, obviously, or they would have put in a claim. And we know that Dulcich had a lot of good reports coming out of school. So they feel as though, you know what? Injuries have been the primary factor. He hasn't worked out. They saw enough in his college tape that they're willing to take a shot. All right. Christine says she'd be interested in the O-line chart. Christine, it's all in this computer, this laptop. Oh, you can't really see that there. It's not showing up. There it is. My spreadsheet on the offensive line is in there. But as I tell people, if they see the charts, I can't let them leave. I spend an awful lot of time reviewing tape and making my charts. And I try to distribute and disseminate some of that information on this program, on the Giants shows, pregame, postgame, radio, TV, BBKL. I try to distribute that stuff when possible. The charts are my pride and joy. I put a tremendous amount of work into them. Here's what I will tell you. I will give you a sample of something on my offensive line charts. Okay? Everybody knows, because it's no secret, right? The Giants have given up 40 sacks this season. How many people can tell you that 20 of them came on third down? And how many people can tell you that 21 of those 40 sacks came on a zone blitz? Probably not too many. I can tell you that because I have every sack logged. Not only do I have every sack logged, I could tell you how many people rushed, if it was a zone blitz, if it was a third down, what the move was, who had the sack, and who was probably, not for sure, but probably the primary offensive player responsible for it. And I can also tell you if the sack resulted in a forced fumble. The Giants, by the way, have not given up a sack on fourth down this year. Some of the numbers to be gleaned from my spreadsheet. Christine says, good night. Oh, Christine, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to hear that. She signed off at 9:32, and it's already 10 o'clock. So we've already gone 2.5 hours. I got a few more people here. I'm telling my people over at Sports Illustrated, guys, let me run just a few more minutes. Let me run into overtime just a few more minutes here because we've got well over 1,000 people who are live and looking in, and I still have another half a dozen folks or so on the chat who want to get in here. Nobody wanted to make a call today, video or audio, and that's okay. I understand. Gary Gaston says, you like the bridge idea for the quarterback as I have proposed, but that means you would trade down. I possibly would. Depends on what the offer is. You know I'm Italian. Give me an offer that I can't refuse. Because you know what? I get it. If the offer is that good, if it's what we call a Godfather offer, that's an offer that you can't refuse. A Godfather offer. If there's a Godfather offer for that high first-round pick, I would absolutely be taking that phone call. That's how I stand right now the first week of December. Drake says, in your opinion, Paul, who will be our offensive line at backups in 2025? Wow. I do think that Thomas will be at left tackle, and I do think that Runyon will still be at left guard. Well, he'll be one of the guards. I don't know. Could he be moved to right guard? Perhaps. I don't know which guard, but I think Runyon will be here and Thomas will be here. John Michael Schmitz has had some real inconsistencies lately. I felt better about him in some games, and then other games, still kind of hoping that he would show more. But I do think he'll still be the starting center. I do think that Illuminor will still be here. He might be starting at one of the guards. I mean, the best case scenario for the Giants, if you really want me to cut this thing right down to its core, if these guys work out correctly, Thomas left tackle, Neal right tackle, Illuminor right guard, Runyon left guard, John Michael Schmitz at center. I would be very pleased if that was the starting five offensive line going into next year. And that's provided Neal shows me more of what I need to see in the final 5 games of the regular season. If he does not, now I got to think about something entirely different. But you ask me, what do I want to see? Who would be? Best case scenario, that's my starting 5. Joe Smith says, any reason why they might have passed on Evans and Forbes? Oh, did we see that one before? I may have already. Oh, no, that was Joey in New York, and he comes back as Joe Smith. Joe, I know sometimes it takes me a while to get to these because, again, I try to give you folks complete answers and full context. To do that, it takes me a lot of time to get through these chats. That's why I love phone calls. I mean, the phone calls can take a long time too, but at least if you get into a phone call, you're going to get on right away. Okay. Yes, they did go with Dulcich. That's correct. Yes, Gary, you are correct. See, I'm not violating any sponsorship rules. I'm reading Gary's post. George Foreman Grill. Classic. Indeed. Maybe, just maybe, the 3rd greatest invention of mankind behind the telephone and electricity. The George Foreman Grill. Wonderful machine. Has fed many a mouths. Billboards builds. I'm part Italian and from Central Jersey, even if I now live in Massachusetts. I've always been a gravy, not sauce. That's okay. I tell people all the time, right? Right? Tomato, tomato, ketchup, sauce, gravy. If it's good and it's homemade, mwah, manja. I don't care what you call it. No, I'm not even going to go any further. That's it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you call it. Just love it. All right. W. Paul in the chat. I'm not sure I understand what these comments are. Connor Welp, Kevin Velasquez, Caleb Torres, W. Paul in the chat. I'm not sure exactly what they're asking about. Okay. Connor Welp. Staying hopeful we will see some Gary Stroman this week. Well, you know what? Stroman's actually given them some decent snaps. And, coming off the scrap heap, there's another guy who you want to give Jerome Henderson some credit for. Because, he hadn't really done much in his NFL career, very short as it may be, comes to the Giants off the scrap heap, and he's actually given them some decent emergency snaps. So we mentioned that. All right. Sean Jackson's back with us again. Oh, look at this. Oh, my. My eyes are getting weary. Wow, we have really gone far. We've gone over 2.5 hours now. Paul, Mekhi Becton and some other offensive linemen who failed as offensive tackle sometimes had more success once moved to offensive guard. That is true. In 25, Thomas expected left tackle, Jermaine Illuminor right tackle. Why not train Neal at guard since he's not above current offensive tackle? Well, here's the thing. Illuminor already has prior NFL experience at guard. He's played 4 positions on the offensive line in the National Football League and has shown a proclivity to succeed with his versatility. So, having said that, I know Neal played guards at Alabama one year. I understand that. Okay? Which is why, last case scenario, if that's the only way to see if they can get production out of Neal and they got to move him inside the guard, then you try it. But I still believe that they believe, and I think they're right, he's better as a tackle. And the Giants as a whole, if their best 5 is on the field in their best spots to get maximum production, I think they're better with Illuminor at guard and Neal at tackle. I think. If it turns out to go the other way, you can come back and tell me that I told you so. Because I'm not going to sit here and say I'm 100% convinced that it won't work any other way. But we all have opinions. My opinion shadows Joe Shane. I think they're better off with Neal at tackle. I'm leaving an asterisk. I'm leaving an asterisk there saying, last resort, if you got to move him to guard to get production, then you do it. So I'm not closing the door on that. I don't think it's a great idea. I think you have to exhaust every possibility of Neal being a competent tackle before you move him. That's how I feel. Okay. Joe Smith's got a few in here. Joe says, with height, the quarterback will make the difference. He'll benefit more from a Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders pick. Well, again, Joe, I don't know how late you are coming in. I would go with a bridge quarterback, and I would not draft either of those guys. I just believe philosophically they're better off going out getting a bridge who's won games in this league before, because I think that will make the Giants a more competitive team in 2025. And if they wanted to draft a second or third round quarterback and maybe have that guy potentially be groomed, or maybe get another quarterback a year or two down the road, that'd be fine. But I want to go the Kurt Warner route. Okay? I'm not going to go through it again, other than he was a bridge quarterback, had the Giants at 5-4. I would go that way. Joe says, will somebody please tell JMS to grow a big beard, please? Joe Smith says, sorry, P-Dot moved over to YouTube. Okay. Whatever. That's okay. Sean Jackson. Hey, you were still there. Okay. Says, thanks for those stats about catchable passes. I just want the Giants to improve their overall play, especially at quarterback and wide receiver. I'm tired of our Giants being an NFL punchline. Sean, everybody inside the Giants facility is just sick over what has happened. Please, make no mistake about it. They all are. Sometimes you just have to chew on the nails. The reality is what it is, and you just got to chew on the nails for the time being. And that's what it's going to be. And you try to find, here's what it is, Sean. You have to change your priorities as the season goes along. Yes, every time you suit up, every coach and every player wants to win. And their top priority should be to be responsible to the organization, to your teammates, and to your coaches, and do everything you can to go out there, leave it all on the field, and show your paying customers that you want to compete, that you have the will to compete, and that you're going to do everything possible to win the ball game. That is first and foremost the priority that every player and coach has to have every time they step on the field. It's not just about professional pride, it's also about it being a very dangerous game. And if you don't play all out on every play and don't give everything you have, there is a devastating chance that you could get hurt, seriously hurt. I can't stand people who say, oh, tank, don't win. Just don't even bother rooting for pro sports if you honestly feel that way. Okay, now, second thing. In terms of the stats, they're facts, okay? That's not a grade. That's not an opinion. Those are facts. And it's just very interesting to see sometimes when facts totally dispute the common narrative. Billboard's Build says goodnight. I say goodnight to you as well. We get down to our last two comments on the chats. Neymar Secon? Do you think Giants fire? And I hope I got that right, Neymar. Do you think Giants fire Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and they promote Mike Kafka and Brandon Brown as GM and firing Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? First of all, I don't think Connor Welp says, good night, have a good one. Absolutely to you. I will say that's not my decision to make. Ownership will think about what to do about the GM. The GM and the ownership will then have a conference and think about what to do with the coach. I have no idea. Staff members underneath the head coach, that's way too far speculation. I will tell you this, Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, is not only a hell of a nice guy, he's a Fordham guy like I am, which means he's also very smart. Hey, Ram tough, baby, right? And I know he's a great football guy. I hope Brandon Brown stays in the Giants organization, although for his sake, if he gets a better offer and a promotion to go somewhere else, like when he interviewed, I believe, with the Chargers last year, I told him, I said, by all means, man, I hope the best for you. I'm also happy for the Giants' sake that he stayed with the Giants organization. Neymar says, what do you think of Grant Nussmeier's connection with Malik Neighbors? The only thing I will say, Neymar, is that I've only seen parts of one LSU game this year. I am so bogged down with NFL and then some of the college games that I call. I don't have time to scout these guys, really, in general, until the season, the NFL season is over. Then I cram like crazy with video cut-ups, and then I talk to scouts. I talk to other football people I know. I also then usually go to the combine and get a tremendous amount of intel at the combine. I know that Nussmeier is considered in the second tier of quarterbacks, right? I know that. There's the top two guys who everybody believes, Ward and Sanders, and then Nussmeier is in the next group, right? I understand that. I have not watched enough of him to give you any kind of strong opinion. So I'm going to pass on that one right now. But thank you very much for being part of the program. All right, so no video calls tonight and no audio calls tonight. But what we did get to were a whole ton of chats, enough to keep us on the air for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Wow. Talk about a long program. You guys kept me in my chair for quite a long period of time. Finished my drink quite a while ago. I'll have to go get another one now that the show is over. But in any event, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Again, our live shows are here every Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We try to do a minimum of 90 minutes. And then if you people just won't let me go, good night, Neymar. Then I'll stay with you. And we talk New York Giants football. And then, of course, remember, every Friday we have a 20-minute tape show where we talk about the state of the team that they're playing, that the Giants are playing, and the 3 key matchups to watch in that ball game. And then on Monday, we come back with our game balls and gassers for the Giants, and we tell you the best plays and sometimes the not so best plays, those are the gassers, on offense and on defense and on special teams. Sometimes they're very obvious, but sometimes they're not very obvious, and it really takes some digging and a real unique perspective to figure out who deserves the game balls and who deserves the gassers. So you've been watching Big Blue Breakdown live. I'm Paul Dottino. This has been part of the New York Giants on SI Media Network and the YouTube page. We're so glad you could join us tonight, and I just want to thank everybody once again for participating in tonight's marathon program. We'll be back with our 3 key matchups on Friday. Until then, so long, everybody.